There's a perennial argument in the role-playing community over whether system matters or not. Now, while I agree that a good games master can get a good game out of just about any genre, out of just about any system, I think that's much more likely and works a lot better if the system and the genre and the theme and the mood and everything work in concert to reinforce each other and to encourage certain kinds of player behaviour. In computer games, you can consider this to be kind of, not genre exactly, but the type of game, like FPS or turn-based strategy or whatever else it might be. You know, certain game ideas work better with certain ways of interacting with them than others. So strategy games work better from a kind of third-person, omniscient sort of view. Action games tend to work better as first-person shooters. In tabletop, there are various systems, probabilities, dice or other random determiners that you can use that can give games different feels, or you can bring in certain systems like Call of Cthulhu's Sanity system to play up those aspects of the game. D&D dominates, partly because it was, well, mostly because it was the first game on the market, I think, and also because it does a lot of things adequately. But there's another term in the role-playing industry, and that's fantasy heartbreaker, which is where someone takes to publishing their own game that is really just their own modified version of D&D. There are some successes of that. Palladium Fantasy, for example, is basically their homebrew D&D game with a lot of the numbers rubbed off. And the whole old school Renaissance movement is essentially everyone's homebrew rules, but just without the pretension that this is a new game. But the ground is littered with failed fantasy heartbreakers, many of which had some very good aspects to them. The Riddle of Steel, for example, was a game that really emphasized the melee combat and the worth of warriors and so on, and I believe it was written by someone who used to be in the SCA and did medieval fencing and so on. A lot of people who are into that in real life, you know, the Society for Creative Anachronism or European martial arts, you know, things like that, they're often frustrated with games because they don't feel that they accurately represent, you know, what combat was like, what the weapons were like, and so on. And the Riddle of Steel addresses that, but that it just failed to catch on. I think you can grab that for free legitimately online now if you want to look for it, and from a game design perspective it is quite interesting. And if you're someone who's into, you know, European medieval martial arts and so on, I think you'll find a lot there to scratch that particular itch. But the point is, it didn't particularly succeed. But games succeed better when the system fits. Yeah, if you can't really run a game of Call of Cthulhu that successfully using, say, the Feng Shui system, right? It just works a lot better where the system and the game are in concert and reinforcing one another. So I've made a big decision on this basis recently. So I've been working on a game called The Green, and it's meant to be like a trio of games, kind of like a self-enclosed trilogy of games addressing the same issue at different time periods. And it's meant to be a kind of green post-apocalypse. I'm sure you've seen images. I mean, Chernobyl's been in the news and in the public consciousness a lot lately, and Pripyat has been essentially taken back over by nature. You can see similar images of Detroit, but the devastation there is just from neglect and lack of money and so on. And so you can see where roofs have collapsed and trees have started growing inside buildings, or vines or kudzu or whatever has completely taken over, or cracked roads and so on. You know, this whole abandoned neighborhoods in Detroit. And I've long been a fan of that kind of apocalyptic imagery, where nature is reclaiming human artifice. I liked it in Journey to the West, I guess it was PS3 game, wasn't it? And it's something I've liked about Days Gone and The Last of Us. You know, when you're exploring the ruins, and it's gone back to nature. So I wanted to explore that kind of thing. And initially I was using the system that I used for Kagai, Guru Gore Girls. That system's really designed for multiple characters, multiple players, to work together, to team up, to make sure that nobody feels useless, and that they can all contribute to combat and to take down big singular enemies. I was thinking of kind of boss fights in computer games when I did it, and how in terms of multiplayer in something like say Monster Hunter, you can team up and you can use your various complementary abilities to help each other out to defeat the enemy. And that was the system I was going to use for the green, but it doesn't really fit, and the more I think about it, the more it doesn't fit. And Actual Fucking Monsters has done pretty well, and the system in particular seems to have drawn some praise. It's quite simple, it's quite easy to grasp, and it does one key important thing that I need for the green. In Actual Fucking Monsters, the driver of it is similar to the feeding mechanisms in Vampire or whatever. You have to indulge your monstrous side in order to use your powers and be fully effective. And if you don't feed, if you don't transgress, if you don't do what your monster side demands, then you quite rapidly become weaker. And that's one surefire way to get players to do something, is if you offer them bonuses or you offer the mitigation of penalties if they go ahead and do something. So that's the kind of main game loop at the center of Actual Fucking Monsters, is that you have to do transgressive things in order to be at full strength and to use your monstrous powers. But doing those things, feeding, transgressing, draws attention, draws hunters, draws the authorities or distraught relatives or whatever else, and gets you into trouble, forcing you to use your monster powers and your full strength in order to survive it, which then drives the fact that you have to feed. So that's the game loop in Actual Fucking Monsters. Whereas in D&D, the game loop is go on adventures, get more powerful, get more treasure, so you can be more powerful and more experienced to go into harder dungeons to get more treasure and so on, and that's so that climbs up. That's more of a set of stairs in the Vonnegutian sort of story terms, whereas Actual Fucking Monsters is man in a hole, man in a hole, man in a hole, and until it's done. In the green, I want to drive players to do more than simply survive. It's primarily a sort of survival game that's about family, both chosen and real family, and finding a way to rebuild, I guess. And I want to drive players to do that. So its main central mechanic is a limiting mechanic in a similar way to the way it is in Actual Fucking Monsters, but it's based around Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So your die type essentially is limited, and so your ability to succeed is limited by how well you meet your needs. So you got food and shelter all the way through to self-actualization, so that there is a mechanism there to drive people to find food, to find water, to find shelter, to find heat, to find comfort, to improve themselves, to indulge in leisure, and so on. So there's a mechanical driver there to kind of force people to scavenge, to build, to recover, because otherwise they can't use their character to their full potential. So that's the driver there. And so it seems like the system from Actual Fucking Monsters will work a hell of a lot better for that than the system from Kagai. So yeah, because writing your own system is a huge pain in the arse, and tends to require more playtesting than otherwise. And playtesters are like chicken's teeth. They're really hard to find. Well, yeah, playtesters are easy to find. Playtesters who will actually give you useful, decent feedback, or any feedback at all, that's another matter. Plenty of people are in it for free games. Very few are willing to actually play the thing and report back. But You only really get the kind of exact tailoring you need to your game if there's an open system out there that you can nick, or that only needs slight modification, or if you can make your own. But it's a pretty daunting process making your own. But yeah, so that's going to delay my next game coming out. Fortunately, I've farmed out some of the Tales of Gore adventure writing to other people, so hopefully other stuff will continue to go on in the background. Alright, back to work. Zang.